What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett, bringing you all the recap and review of the action of this past week. A big storyline that we didn't expect to happen kind of took over the headlines. There were a lot of important games, big games this weekend, ranked matchups. But the biggest news, of course, was the firing of Penn State's James Franklin. Before I get into all that, though, if you're going to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. But again, obviously, the biggest news out of the Week 7 action in college football was the firing of James Franklin from Penn State. He went from an incredible run of coaching there, really. I think he finished 104-41, 34-8 over the previous 3 seasons. He had 6 10-win seasons in total in Happy Valley. And he went from, just in the span of 3 weeks, from leading Oregon in the first overtime, having a chance where if his defense gets a stop there, they get a win, and they're debatedly probably the number 2 team in the country, to losing 3 straight. They lose that game to the Ducks in overtime. Then they go out on the road to UCLA and lose to the Bruins in a stunning loss. But then they lose to Northwestern at home, and they also lose Drew Aller at quarterback. Obviously wishing Drew nothing but the best in his recovery. Out for the season, obviously, which is terrible news for the Nittany Lions, and now they're minus their head coach. You go over kind of some of those numbers, and you think that seems pretty extreme to fire a guy for having that level of success and being 3-3 this season. But there were signs that this might have been coming. For one, kind of the running joke, especially in Big Ten circles, is Big Game James, because he did not win the big games. He finished 4-21 versus top 10 opponents. And another kind of instance that I think maybe gave kind of signs of this coming in the near future was the implosion of 2021. I think a lot of people maybe forget about that. I honestly had, until I kind of looked back over his tenure at Penn State. He went from starting 5-0 from a team that had struggled during the COVID season in 2020, but started really hot to that season. They were up to number 4, as highly ranked as number 4 in the country. And then Sean Clifford goes down with an injury, and they lose 6 out of their final 8 games, including their bowl game. So there were kind of some signs there. The question now is, what is next for Penn State and what's next for James Franklin? Terry Smith takes over as the interim head coach. Pat Clark, the AD at Penn State, is saying obviously that he's fully behind Smith. To me, obviously the front runner for this job, considering his ties to Penn State as an alum and family and all that, there is Matt Rule, the current Nebraska head football coach, and he didn't exactly give a firm no when he was asked about it at his Monday press conference in Lincoln. So keep an eye on that. I would be shocked if he leaves during the middle of the season. I don't think that is even a possibility, but there's going to be a lot of noise around that. And I hope for the Cornhuskers' sake that it doesn't distract from what they're building this season, because they've started really, really well. They're back in the top 25 for the first time in a while, and playing really well. For Franklin, I think kind of the obvious here, where is his next step? The obvious is to be a Power 4 offensive coordinator somewhere. That's where his background is. Or maybe a Group of 5, or really going from Penn State. Yes, I know you kind of expect a natural demotion because he was fired, rather than looking for a job and kind of getting that promotion. But he could go to easily a Group of 5 school. I think he could go even to a kind of lower to mid-level Power 4. He's not going to make a lateral movement, I don't think, but there are job openings at Oklahoma State, at Arkansas, at Virginia Tech, and UCLA. Though Arkansas, we'll see if they stick with Bobby Petrino. Oklahoma State, they continue to just look worse and worse. I think they're going to be looking for a whole program overhaul, and that'll mean bringing in a new head coach. And then I think Virginia Tech is a possibility, and something else to keep an eye on. If Clark Lee leaves Vanderbilt, which I would be surprised by, it seems like he's really building something there, and he's gotten that program into a place where they can be in that college football playoff consideration without having to have like the most perfect season ever, kind of like what Luke Fickell had at Cincinnati, where he had to go kind of undefeated to kind of open up those bigger job opportunities. I think Clark Lee probably can stay at Vanderbilt. But if he did, obviously Franklin used to coach there. So that's kind of the outlook there. Now, though, moving into the next storyline, obviously we'll be keeping an eye on the Penn State coaching situation, where that goes forward. I imagine there won't be too much the rest of this season, certainly in the offseason, though. Number 7, Indiana shuts down number 3 Oregon late and wins 30-20 in Autzen Stadium, snapping the Ducks' nation-leading 18-game home winning streak. It's the Hoosiers' first top 5 win since 1967 when they beat Purdue. Fernando Mendoza answered a late pick 6, kind of in the... I'm trying to remember now if it was the third quarter or maybe early in the fourth quarter. There was a pick 6 that Oregon returned, obviously, for a touchdown to tie the game at 20. After that, though, Mendoza was 6 for 8 for 66 yards and a touchdown, which was an 8-yard throw to Elijah Surratt, who had another huge game. He led the way. Omar Cooper made some big catches as well. But also, it was the Indiana defense. They had 2 interceptions and 6 sacks. Lewis Moore got the key interception when the Hoosiers were already up 27-20 on the Ducks' first possession after that touchdown I just mentioned from Mendoza to Surratt. And then Aiden Fisher, Kellen Wyatt, Isaiah Jones, and Elijah Hardy all had 1+ sack, one or more sacks, and then 1.5 or more tackles for loss. Jones also had the the second interception, or I guess the first one earlier in the game. Indiana is up to number 3 in the country, and the outlook for them, they're going to host Michigan State, a hot UCLA team, and Wisconsin, and then their road games the rest of the year at Maryland, at an ice-cold Penn State, a game that would have looked a lot bigger earlier, and then at Purdue. I think this is a Hoosiers team. If they don't slip up in one of those games, I think they're honestly favored to get to the Big Ten championship game now. I don't really see them losing any of those games. Again, going into the preseason, and even a couple weeks ago, I would have said that game at Penn State would have been a really tough one. And who knows? An interim head coach can revitalize a program and make a team tough to beat. But I see Indiana winning out. And then for Oregon, you got kind of a trap game, couple trap games at Rutgers, at Iowa, and then they're home against USC, who's back in the top 25 after their win over Michigan, and at Washington, who's 5-1, somehow outside of the top 25. The Huskies have a big one at Michigan this week. I'll talk more about that game in my Week 8 preview, because I think that one could be really important for both of those two teams. Even though neither one is ranked, it's going to be really big. So that is the storyline there. Next up, I'm not going to say the catchphrase, Texas is back, but Texas does return and shows that they're not done yet with a 23-6 win in Red River rivalry over number 6 Oklahoma. The defense was dominant. This looked like the Texas defense that got them all the way to the college football playoff semifinals and nearly got them to the national championship game. They had 3 interceptions. Malik Muhammad kind of made a little bit of a comeback. He had been kind of quiet. We know that he's a very talented player, definitely NFL caliber player, but he hadn't really made big plays. I hadn't really heard his name much this season, at least. He had 2 interceptions in this game. And then the Longhorns also had 5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, and 6 pass deflections. Colin Simmons led the way. Again, a guy that kind of hadn't played to the level they did last year up to this point in the season, but he led the way with 2.5 sacks. Also, Arch Manning looked a lot better, kind of played like Julian Sayin did. Just kind of made the throws that he had to make. He was pretty surgical with his throws, made good decisions, smart reads, 21 for 27, 166 yards, and a touchdown. Trey Wisner had 94 rushing yards, and then a huge special teams play that really kind of pretty much sealed this game for Texas, in a sense at least. Ryan Niblett with a 75-yard punt return touchdown. The outlook going forward for both of these teams, Texas has a couple of manageable road games. I mean, obviously they're going to have to be careful going into both of these, but they're at Kentucky, at Mississippi State. Then looking down the kind of the back stretch, they're home against Vanderbilt, at Georgia, and home against Texas A&M. So the thing for Texas, because of their resume and the opponents that they've played, they probably could maybe afford to lose one of those, but certainly no more than that. And even if they do lose one of those, they're going to be very, very close to being outside of that bubble. I think they probably have to win out. I think they have the potential to do that. That game at Georgia looms very large, and we'll see if Texas A&M can avoid their late season collapse that they've had in recent years. Oklahoma, though, their schedule just gets really tough from here on out. I mean, this is a game where if they win this one, they're really set up where they can even afford to lose probably 2 games going into this backstretch. But now they can probably only afford to lose 1. Again, maybe a 9-3 team, but it's hard to say for sure. It's only the second year of the playoff. Last year, a 3-loss team could not make the playoffs. South Carolina was one of those first teams out. And speaking of the Gamecocks, that's Oklahoma's next game on the road. Then they're home against number 5 Ole Miss, at number 11 Tennessee, at number 6 Alabama, home against number 16 Missouri, and home against number 10 LSU. I honestly see it being a tough road. I don't see them getting fewer than 2 losses the rest of the way. They had looked pretty good, but their offense was pretty much shut down by Texas. We'll see if John Mateer can get back to full health. It didn't seem like he was throwing those 3 interceptions, but that will be key to watch for Oklahoma is the health of their quarterback. Another key SEC game, it's a 3rd straight ranked win for Alabama with a 27-24 win over Missouri. Ty Simpson, again, really good passing the ball, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. The Tide were really, to me, kind of in control the whole way. This wasn't really a game where you felt like Missouri had a great chance to win. They did have the ball late, and they did have a chance to go down and at least tie the game with a field goal. But Bo Perbula threw a late interception there, kind of overshot his target, and Alabama gets the win. For Alabama, they're going to be home against Tennessee, 3rd Saturday in October. Obviously, I'll give a lot of attention to that game when I preview the Week 8 action. Then they're at South Carolina. That's a trap game, big-time trap game for the Tide. Home against LSU, home against Oklahoma, and then obviously the Iron Bowl at Auburn, where anything can happen to end the season. For Mizzou, I think the rest of their path looks manageable. They're at Auburn this week, or in one of their next games. That's going to be an important game where they've got to look to avoid kind of that trap game, do what Georgia was able to do. Then they're home against Vanderbilt, home against Texas A&M, and at Oklahoma. There are so many games in the SEC that are going to have massive repercussions in the college football playoff race. I think Mizzou is going to play a huge role in that. Depending on especially how they do, even if they don't make it themselves, they could play spoiler for Texas A&M or for Oklahoma. In the game against Vandy, considering what the schedule looks like for both of these 2 teams, it could be a college football playoff play-in game when all is said and done. I mean, these are 2 teams that, especially if Mizzou wins that game, I think then they could probably go 1-1 in those last couple games against A&M and Oklahoma. If they lose, I don't really see them winning both of those last 2 games. So that Mizzou-Vandy game will be really big, I think, but that's kind of the outlook for those teams. Georgia and LSU, 2 teams kind of right on the fringe of the top 10, had matching 20-10, pretty uninspiring wins. Offenses struggled. I mean, LSU, that's been the story all season. Georgia, they're on the road against Auburn. I think Auburn proved that they have a pretty good defense, but their offensive struggles are still on display there. Tennessee and Ole Miss both survived. Tennessee survived the late Arkansas rally. Joey Aguilar and Deshaun Bishop are 2 really good just players overall. Aguilar had a couple of good runs as well, and then Bishop obviously ran the ball all over the place. And Aguilar throwing the ball continues to do really well. Ole Miss just looked kind of lethargic. It was a home game, I think kind of an early kickoff against Washington State. They win 24-21. In Champaign, number 1 Ohio State, the defense really stymied number 17 Illinois. They held the Illini to an interception, punt, turnover on downs, and a fumble on their first 4 drives. And really by that point, it kind of put the game away, led 20-0. Another great effort by the defense. Red zone stops once again right on the goal line. They made a stop in this game. Continue to be the best red zone defense in college football really over the last 2 years. I think the Buckeyes are probably the best team in the country. I do think Miami and kind of Indiana now are 2 teams that maybe have a better resume than the Buckeyes. But I do think the Buckeyes have the best overall team, and I think they do still have that really good win over Texas. They have a good win on the road at Washington, who, again, Huskies continue to play well. So it's not like the Buckeyes are way behind both of those teams, but I think Miami maybe has the better resume. Texas Tech shut down Florida's advance, or Texas A&M, shut down Florida's advance after their upset win over Texas. Marcel Reed with 2 total touchdowns, and then Reuben Owens and Le'Veon Moss combined for just under 100 yards rushing and had a touchdown each. So the Aggies continue to win and get a pretty impressive win there. Mentioned USC already. They get a win. They shut down Michigan, held that high-powered rushing attack to just 109 yards. For USC, the Trojans are at number 13 Notre Dame and then at number 25 Nebraska. This is another one of those games. I might do a video later this week kind of highlighting some of the games, especially maybe under the radar games that could have a say in the college football playoff, and I think this might be one of them. So keep an eye on that game. And then they're also going to be at number 8 Oregon. So the Trojans down the backstretch, they're going to have 3 key road games. They're probably going to have to win 2 of those, though. They already have that loss to Illinois. I don't think they get in with 3 losses. So they're probably going to have to win 2 of those 3. They can afford to lose 1, but again, they're going to have to win 2. And if they don't, they're on the outside looking in. If they do, I think the Trojans get in. They're probably not getting the Big Ten championship game, but probably getting in as a 10-2 team. Then kind of a well-rounded look at the Big 12 because it was kind of an interesting week there. Number 18, BYU and Utah earned really good wins, and that's setting up the first ranked versus ranked Holy War since 2009. The Cougars had a 10-point fourth-quarter comeback and a double overtime win over Arizona. Shout out the Wildcats. They put in a heck of an effort in that one because they actually fell behind, I think, 14-0 early. Noah Fafita has looked a lot better this season. I kind of talked about that when I was previewing this game, but Bear Bachmeier looked even better. He had 3 touchdowns, including what proved to be the game-winning rushing touchdown in the second overtime. For the Utes, they were absolutely dominant against the team that looked like the preseason favorite, to a lot of people at least, in the Big 12, dominating number 21 Arizona State 42-10. They held the Sun Devils to 124 passing yards and 135 rushing yards. In spite of going without a turnover forced, they still just dominated Arizona State and get a win there. And then also kind of a game that I thought could be interesting, but to me just kind of shows how much of a class above the rest of the conference Texas Tech is. They rout Kansas 42-17. Something to watch though, Baron Morton was injured again, but they really kind of leaned on the running game because of that. Cameron Dickey rushed for 263 yards and 2 touchdowns. 2 of those teams that I mentioned, obviously BYU and Utah, meet this coming week. And then November 8th in Lubbock, BYU against Texas Tech. That could very well be a game that determines which team goes to the Big 12 championship game and which team ends up being left out. So that's a huge one. Both of those teams, if BYU can beat Utah this week, are probably undefeated going into that one. So keep an eye, mark your calendars for that one. Finally, rounding out the top 25, number 22 Iowa State and number 25 Florida were both upset this week. 2 teams that were kind of in that range where if they win out, have a really strong finish to the season, could have made the playoff, but Iowa State loses in Boulder to Colorado, and Florida State loses at home to Pitt. I would say that would hurt Alabama, but Alabama's going through such a tough SEC conference that I think that's kind of just a blip on their schedule right now. Finally, out of the group of 5, I've done kind of this group of 5 watch each week. Number 24, South Florida, forces 5 North Texas turnovers, and they scored 28 points from a period with 1 minute left in the second quarter to 11:30 left in the third quarter. So that's like 4.5 minutes of game time where they scored 28 points, really put that game away. Again, their defense forced a bunch of turnovers. I said going into that one, I can't take too much credit because I picked the Mean Green to win the game, but I did highlight how USF has 6 interceptions on the season. That number's bumped up now to 8 or 9. I'm trying to remember if they had 3 interceptions or 3 fumble recoveries. Either way, that number continues to be increased. And in 2 weeks, you've got South Florida at number 22 Memphis. Right now, South Florida is the higher ranked group of 5 team, but obviously a Tigers win here would kind of shake up not only that group of 5 picture, but also the American Conference championship race. Finally, rounding out with this video with kind of my top 10 in college football playoff outlook. Number 1, Ohio State, top team out of the Big Ten right now. Number 2, Miami, top team out of the ACC. Number 3, Indiana. Number 4, Texas A&M, the highest ranked SEC team. Number 5, Alabama. Number 6, Ole Miss. Number 7, Texas Tech. That's the highest ranked team out of the Big 12. Number 8, Georgia. Number 9, Oregon. Number 10 is Georgia Tech. I like Georgia Tech right now over the teams that I have kind of right behind them, LSU and Tennessee. I'm kind of torn on those teams. I've been more impressed by Tennessee, but I do think LSU has a slightly better resume. So those two teams, kind of hard to separate them right now. I would honestly, if I were ranking these teams, and I'm going to do it, I'm going to put Tennessee as that number 11. Then I would have South Florida as that number 12 team, highest ranked Group of 5 team right now. And then I would have Tennessee along with BYU as kind of those first couple teams on the outside looking in. But that is my breakdown. A ton of action to go over out of the Week 7 slate. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this week. And let me know also in the comments if you want to see a video. I probably will later this week, kind of in the midweek period before I give my preview and predictions for Week 8. Let me know if you want to see a video going over the top 10 games remaining in the college football season. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.